topic that you're going to be talking about is something that will be very valuable and interesting to our listeners, and that is creating conscious chemistry with your ideal match. So as we get started, I wonder if you both could share a little bit about how you began teaching this work.
Well, like you, Michelle, I was single for a very long time. I didn't meet Robert until I was 41. And, through my journey of just being single and trying to figure life out, I didn't follow the path my friends did. I didn't have babies and get married in my 20s. And so it's kind of like left to figure it out. And so I found personal development. I loved it and tried a lot of different things to help me improve myself. And what happened was no matter what I did, I always ended up back alone, and I always felt that there was something wrong with me because I was single. And I kept beating myself up, like comparing myself to my friends and saying, how come I'm doing all this work and they're going off and getting married and here I am? I think I'm more evolved than most of the people I see get married, and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And maybe there's something really wrong with me. And the only thing that was available for me was a lot of like therapeutic techniques, like healing the past and forgiving your father and mother and, looking at your wounds. And the more I dug, the further I went deeper into a hole of, I'm really messed up, I didn't think I was that messed up until I started doing personal development. And I said, there has to be a better way. And when I finally let go, discovered the unconscious mind, I went to hypnotherapy school, and I found out there's this whole other part of my mind that I wasn't even addressing. That really woke up a part of me that made me see why I was in my own way, and that how all those dating tips and no matter what I did to act accordingly to get a man, they didn't work because unconsciously I was not set up and aligned with having a partner. And so through that journey, I discovered what was unconscious that was stopping me. I realized it was my choice, that I was the one who was pushing love away. And when I brought it to consciousness, I was able to choose. And then I met Robert. And then when Robert and I got together, he could tell you his part of the story, but we both got together and said, I want to stop helping. I want to be on a mission to not let single people feel like there's something wrong with them. And they just, you're already lonely. And I just wanted to be a voice of hope, a voice of inspiration, and also show them about the unconscious and that there is a way that you can transform your life and not only love in every area by understanding the parts of your mind that you can't see. And it's really there for you, and it's not about therapy or healing. It's more about you just becoming aware of your psyche and how it works. So, and then when I wrote the book, my dream was to write a book, and I got to write a book. And really when you step into that trueness of who you are, all your dreams can come true, not only finding love, but finding your path in life, and I just want to share that with people, and that's why I got into the work, and Robert and I have such a great relationship that we want to share that with other people, that it's possible to find great love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In a nutshell, that's how I got here.
That's how I found her.
That's how he found me.
Yeah, and Rob, we'll have you share in just a second, but I just wanted to say, Debbie, I can so relate to what you shared there. It just resonated so strongly with me, that journey and that path, and wondering what in the world was wrong and why it seemed so difficult. And so I know it's going to be incredibly valuable, and this entire event is designed to give women who are on this journey some hope. And so I'm so grateful that you have a message of hope. So, Rob, share a little bit about your path, if you will.
Sure. For me, it was a bit different. I had been in a couple of serious relationships, and I was married at one point, but it didn't work out. And there, in the process, I had created a lot of pain for not only for others, but for myself as well. And being a psychologist and kind of studying a lot of these things and working with families and children and really working on mental health issues all the time, I started to wonder, well, what's going on here? If somebody like myself who has this knowledge of the mind is not able to really put it into effect and make it work on a practical level, how is it that people manage to create families and relationships and love in their life? When I started to look around and see, what was available for people that were asking these questions and wanted something practical to work on this aspect of their life, which is really such an important piece, right? If we think about career and spiritual life, the only other piece that's so up there in importance is our love life, right? Are we able to create and to connect with somebody else at that soulful, deep level, and it creates a great meaning in our life. When I looked around, nobody had good answers for me or for others. In psychology, the psychology had really run away from emotions, and they had focused as a profession really on the neuropsychology, the cognitive processing of the brain, and really kind of said emotions are too difficult to study, to deal with. We'll leave that up to the poets. Let them deal with it. Right? And it's only been recently that a few psychologists and philosophers have really started to look at what is love, what is the emotional life of the human being, and how can we incorporate it and kind of bring it to light. My training, though, had a piece that something in the back of my mind kind of kept saying, go back to this, which was Jungian psychology. Because in Jungian psychology, which is a psychodynamic theory, right, it talks about the dynamics of the mind, of the psyche, and it includes not only a personal unconscious like Freud did, but the collective unconscious, which really connects us to our deeper self, what people call the soul or the spirit in other traditions and cultures. So here was the psychology that included this aspect of the mind and was able to account for how people fall in love and how people find that true purpose in them. And it gives us then a model of how to work with that part of our heart, that part of our mind, that otherwise is really inaccessible to us. Because it is, by definition, unconscious. We can't see it. So when I met Debbie and we started talking about what she was doing, kind of working on helping singles and relationships and these ideas, and this idea started to kind of come to fruition now that we might be able to apply this psychology now in a very real and practical way to give people the tools that they need to finally have a handle on this very, very unconscious part of their mind. And that's how I came to the work. And it's been an incredible journey so far, and we're just really beginning. But the response has been tremendous. I mean, people all over the world that we work with, it's transformed their lives, basically, because it gives them a way to work on this instead of just depending on luck or chance or trying to change their behavior externally. No, this gives you a way to really open your heart up in a true sense.
Yeah. That's very, very lovely, the way you said that. And I think that this is going to be so incredibly valuable because there are a lot, as you know, there are a lot of so-called experts out there who are kind of into kind of the tips and tricks kind of concepts. And so I love the opportunity to share with our listeners something deeper, right?
Absolutely.
There can be value in some of that, but I love the opportunity to share something deeper. So I'm just wondering...
we'll go deep. Don't you worry.
Oh, I love it. We're ready. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, if you can share one big thing that a woman, we're speaking to women today, can do to change their love life and find the one.
Well, it's really simple. It's to look within themselves versus looking externally for the answer. What we tend to do is say, well, if I'm on the right dating site, or if and when they meet someone, they're very externalized of what the other person's thinking and how they're, how the other person's perceiving them and what's going on with the other person, so they can pull them in. It's like kind of like the lasso, like how can I get them to stay, to call, to make this relationship last. And it's very, very focused on what the other person's doing and reacting from the other person. And when I say go within, it's understanding what is going inside of me in response to their behavior, in response to dating online and not getting any results, or the response to having someone not call. That's what you can work with, is the feeling and the response that goes on inside of you. And that is actually a direct line to what unconsciously is stopping you. And what we tend to do, and even when we first start working with people, it's like, but he didn't call. Should I call him back? And it's like, what is that? Work with yourself. Like, what is that reaction? What's happening with you? And we've had so many people realize that they are really more in control of who they're attracting and what their relationship is if they could turn inside, and it's an internal experience. And if you think about it with love, you can't go inside another person's mind. You can touch a person and have shared experiences, but your experience is really inside your head of what that relationship is. So if you don't have that together, what do you think? It doesn't matter what that other person does. You're going to perceive and see them in the way your mind is talking. And so that's really what our work is about understanding how your mind is actually projecting more in the relationship than you realize. And if you start by going inside, you'll always be in control. It's not about what dating site's the best or how many dates you go on a week or if you do call or don't call. And if they're needy, if you're being too needy or not, or being too evasive or not, it doesn't matter. It's really what's going on inside of you that dictates what you see out in what's matching you. And that's what we're going to talk about, is conscious chemistry and how to create that.
Very nice. Did you want to add anything to that, Rob?
Sure. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will think it's fate. So what he means is that until we are able to examine our unconscious mind, to bring it up to our awareness, we're going to experience our life as happening to us, and us kind of being innocent bystanders or, just passive observers. But when we are able to examine this part of our mind, which he called the unconscious, right, and it has components which really give us a clue as to how we attach to the opposite sex, how we project these images that we have in our mind onto the opposite sex, and that they create these very powerful experiences which we call love and attraction. When we're able to examine those parts, then we're able to transform them and to become aware of the way we're living our destiny. So in essence, we get to direct our destiny instead of being kind of passive observers of it and just waiting for life to happen to us. So it's a very powerful shift that occurs. He talks about the anima, of course, and the animus. we call it the inner Eve and the inner Adam. So for a woman, for example, her inner Adam is an unconscious part of her psyche. When she sees a man that matches that energetically, she projects her unconscious image onto him. And that powerful experience of experiencing the unconscious externally is really like a spiritual experience. That's why love is so powerful, because it gives you that sense that there's something beyond my own ego mind here. Right? It transcends and it transports you back to the garden, basically, to the beginning of life, to the true essence of our life, which is that spiritual essence. So that accounts for how we fall in love. But when people don't understand what's happening, they miss the opportunity to use that as a springboard for a real spiritual life. Because as the projection starts to fade,
because the guy doesn't do what he's supposed to do.
Well, the person starts to see that they're just mortal, like everyone else, and they have flaws, and they're human, right? Instead of that projection of beauty and divinity, they start to see the human being. And then that's why people say, well, we grew apart, or I fell out of love, or I found somebody else, or something like that, because they don't take the opportunity, in essence, because they don't know what's going on. But when people have the tools to take advantage of that opportunity, then it becomes a very powerful way of working to create a spiritual life in through the relationship.
And you'll notice that in relationships, in the beginning, even if it's just like one date, you have this great date with someone and it feels like, and then all of a sudden they don't call. Or you go out a few dates, or then they sleep together and then they stop calling, or one person kind of pulls out. Well, the person that pulls out loses the projection first. And then what happens is the other person is left with the projection still shining, like they're so great, they're so divine, like I'm lost without them. And they're actually searching for that part of themselves, and they think, if I don't get that person back, a part of me's lost. And that's how it feels. It's just this yearning. And so that's why when we have relationships, they can be so heart-wrenching, because we're really dealing with really deep, powerful parts of our psyche that are so beautiful, but also when we don't understand what we're experiencing, it feels like such a loss when the projection, when it's pulled away. It's like you get this favorite toy and someone takes it away from you, and you think the magic is in the toy, but it's not in the toy, it's your idea of the toy. And so what we help people do is, what we want to do is, when you make this part conscious, you're able to have both parties maintain that connection without idolizing the other person, where you're seeing the divine in the person, you're seeing the human in the person, and you're loving all parts of them, instead of they're only good if they stay perfect and they act a certain way, which is, I agree, the whole dating tips, tricks is about putting on this false persona that is going to fade away. It's like, what are you trying to do? You're trying to fool someone and then that is saying that you're not good enough for who you are. You have to pretend to be someone else for someone to love you. And what we are saying is that you are lovable. It's just like what you're projecting is sometimes from this unconscious part, and then you can actually change your attraction. And I say we fit together like puzzle pieces, like your piece, like your inner Adam, if you're a woman, fits with his inner Eve, and you kind of play this little role. And sometimes it could be a long relationship and it's tumultuous, or sometimes it's a quick relationship, or sometimes it's one person feels it, the other person doesn't, but they each play a role. And so you have the power to change your piece of the puzzle. If you look at what you've been attracting, the pattern, know that you can change it. It's just your default, and that's really our work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in a nutshell, just change your piece of the puzzle. But it's not conscious, so that's the rub. That's the journey, is to find out what it is that I can't see, because if you knew what it was, you'd change it.
Yeah, and it's actually a very empowering message, because I, for many years, went through that experience of not having my subconscious, unconscious stuff conscious, and I was self-sabotaging in all different ways without realizing it, and feeling like this was just my fate. I didn't feel like I had control or over what was happening or over my love life, when those things, when I did some deep inner transformational work and those things became conscious to me, then I was able to move through them. But it wasn't until they became conscious that I was able to move through them and attract my husband. And had I not done that deep inner work, it wouldn't have mattered what dating site I was on, or who I met, or where I went, or what I looked like. I would not have attracted a soulmate.
Precisely.
So many people say, I ask them, why are you still single? What do you think? And a lot of them say, well, I live in a city where there's not enough men, or I don't.
Yes.
It's like, no. It's not external. And really, that is the most important thing. If you realize that you chose the love life you have right now, and most of you unconsciously, to just accept that. Like, I'm choosing this for some reason. Why? And if you can discover the why, you can have a new choice. And so you're working against yourself more than the external forces and the lack of men and the terrible dating sites and all the creeps out there and, all the excuses you hear. Or I'm not at the right age, and men like women 10 years younger or 20 years younger, and blah, 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 blah. It's nothing to do with any of that. Those are all like, we could give you an exception to every rule, every excuse that everyone has made.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you may have already started to touch on this, but why do you think that women so often have chemistry with the wrong person?
Well, the inner Adam that Robert talked about, it's kind of like I call it the man file. I'm not the technical person, and he's the psychological technical person. I like to put everything in plain language. And it's basically, when you're born with this container in your psyche that holds ideas of men. And it is basically archetypal. Like, we all have an experience collectively of men and women as humans. And we all have an experience of a father as human. So our idea of what we interact when we watch our father, when we experience our father as a woman, and how our father relates to our mother, it's all like going into this file. How he reacts to her, how she reacts to him and relates, and what works, what doesn't work. When he is mad at me, what do I do? Your coping mechanisms. And so your ego develops this way to survive with this man. And then every man around you, your big brothers, your little brothers, your cousins, uncles, all the men in your life go into this file, and it's like your unconscious is just like collecting data. So every time a man comes in around, it's like a computer program. It goes, okay, I know how to deal with this. This is a man. This is how I react. This is what I do. And then as we have our first crush, and then we have our relationships through our life, it keeps going into this file. The primary person that influences us with our relationships is our father. We've all heard this if you've done therapy and the thing is, a lot of people think that, well, that's just why I like these people and there's nothing I can do to change it. And really, the way we work with the inner Adam is that you can actually work with your inner Adam and change that part of your psyche, which not many people know that you can actually change it. And for me, my father was a little distant, very distant, worked a lot, was never around. And when he was around, he was angry. So what I learned to do is shut up and clam down when he was around and hide and be very intimidated by him. And so when I would go into a relationship and a guy was really nice and I love you, Debbie, and was like really sweet, I'd be like, oh my God, he's so feminine and he's too needy and I don't like him. And then I would go for the guy that's like tough and charismatic and kind of like not emotionally open like my dad was. And I was always falling for those guys. And it wasn't because I wanted a bad guy, but because this is what I knew was familiar to me. And it's really interesting because we do love our parents. You know, we do have this love. So there's all this like mixed emotion and feeling around what love is. And so it's like this unconscious draw. And it also, since how I coped with my father was to shut down, why would I want someone who's open? Because I'm shut down. So when I'm around a man, the best man for me to be with would be someone who's unavailable because there's no threat. You know, I don't have to open up that wall. And so what I realized, you know, and a lot of women can resonate with this, I know, is that we think that the guy's the problem, like he's the one who's not available. But when I realized I was the one who that's how what I did is I shut down around men. Oh, I'm the one who's running away. I'm the one who's running away from commitment. And when I brought that to consciousness, within weeks I met Rob. I mean, it just completely changed everything. But I had to it wasn't a logical realization. It was more like a transformation that happened through a number of things I did. But it was like it just kind of came to a head, and I was like, oh. And it was like you see the whole matrix played out of all your relationships, and then I was able to choose again. And so women go for those unavailable, and you always hear, because you're unavailable, but we don't know why. And so for those of you listening, just go back to your childhood. Like, what was your relationship with men? You know, what was your MO for operating around them? You know, what kept you safe? What stopped you from, really getting close to them?
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to add, we don't shy away from going into childhood and those kind of things like in therapy models, but ours is not a therapy model at all. We simply see it as the human condition, that our minds are conditioned by the events of our family, right? Mm-hmm. The environment that we grew up becomes important because we're social creatures. We're very intuitive. As children, we absorb kind of the emotional environment that we're in. And all that becomes part of our unconscious mind, the way we see the world and the way we see ourselves in the world. So we need to go there, definitely, but not in a blaming sense or in forgiving sense of forgiving the parents or believing that our parents messed us up somehow or anything like that. It's simply becoming conscious again of the unconscious part. As we do that, as we bring light into that unconscious part of our mind, then we're able to transform it. We're no longer, it no longer dictates to us what kind of relationships we can create. So we're free to choose. That's the transformation right there. And, we see that the usefulness of looking at the patterns we've created in the past, even the difficult relationships, they're very useful because they show us where we need to go, what we're running from, mm-hmm. right? Jung calls that the shadow, basically, that we create this persona that we present to the world, and it works really well. It works for us, and it's very functional and adaptive, but at the same time, if we're not aware of the shadow that we create in constructing the persona, then the shadow is playing out in the projections that we experience, the relationships mm-hmm. that we create, the limitations that we experience in our work and our life. So that work really starts in, like Debbie says, looking inside. We begin the journey inward, and the very things that for most people are problems and things to get rid of or things to push away, for us now they become very useful fuel for the process of growth. Because in those very things that we bump up against, there is the answer to our growth. Mm-hmm. So we don't judge things as problems or as symptoms to get rid of. on the contrary, we move towards those things that trigger us, that we know are difficult for us, but we move towards them in a non-judgmental way, in an open way. And so we begin now to experience ourselves and our life in a very different context. Instead of defending our ego and pushing away the shadow aspects, we begin to experience an openness, which is what people would call it kind of opening your heart, right? So love then, it becomes a very real possibility in our life because we're no longer shut down. We no longer have that armor around us that we feel we need because we feel vulnerable. We become able to be open to experiences and not to judge situations in that automatic black and white way. And so it's a very creative and loving way to live.
That was beautifully said, and I was thinking back as you were both speaking over my 43 years of dating. I used to joke around and say I was going to write a book called Dating for Decades. Years of dating, and at one point I thought it might be like the Encyclopedia Britannica, 24 volumes or something.
Right. And
I was thinking about how often it was that I felt intense chemistry with someone who was obviously, if I was looking at it from a rational standpoint, we were not a fit for each other, but there was intense chemistry, and that was an ongoing pattern. And just talking about these things, I didn't have that awareness, so it was like I kept doing the same thing over and over again. It was like, beating my head against the wall and thinking, why isn't this working when there was such great chemistry?
And actually it's funny because I used to say to my friends that my gauge for if a guy is right for me or not or has a possibility is if I had these flirty feelings, I'd feel flirty with them. That's my little word. Flirty, your heart's beating and you're all like excited and so I'd go on a date and they'd be like, were you flirty? And I'm like, nah, no flirty. And I was like, oh my God, I was so flirty with this guy. And then it would always be the guy that was trouble or didn't want a commitment or just got out of the relationship and wasn't ready or, lived in another city and, had a bunch of problems and, just like, why can't I just feel it? And I realized that my gauge of picking men by the flirtiness was probably not a good way to go. It was just like, it actually led me, but in a way it led me to see who I am. When you have that chemistry, that means that person is more like you than you realize. And a lot of times we don't realize that it's the men that really are afraid to open up to us, that they're not running away because they don't like us. They're not running away because there's something unattractive about us. They're running away because they don't know how to communicate or cope or express themselves, and you don't know if they're running away from every woman, So if you're always attracting the non-committal person, you check inside, and it's actually showing you about you. And really, I speak to so many men, and I've worked with so many men, that if women can hear inside, like, their fear around them, like, they're so sensitive, and there's like, a lot of people think men don't have feelings. They feel so deep. They just don't express it the same way we do. And we don't assume that they don't call because you're not good enough. Most likely it's, you're awesome, and they're terrified to call you, or terrified that they're not enough for you. You don't know. So it's like, always work with yourself, and don't try to figure out or assume what he's thinking about you. And don't put them up on pedestals that they're the prize to attain. I always tell the women I work with is, remember, you're the prize. Like, think about how lucky he's going to feel when he meets you. Like, to have that feeling like someone is out there looking for you. And so follow that chemistry, but then notice what it's feeding back to you. And then as you notice that, adjust it. And it's like fine-tuning your piece of the puzzle, shaping a beautiful relationship for yourself. Because everyone that you're drawn to is showing you something so much about you. And there's a lot of energy there to transform.
Yeah, that's usually the hardest part for all of us to accept, is that we're creating our life, and our relationships really are a reflection of what's in our deeper mind, in our unconscious mind. And so when we attract a certain pattern, right, our tendency is to say, well, it's their problem. I keep attracting these people that have these problems. Right? It's their problem.
I'm perfect. I don't know what's going on.
Without realizing we're the common denominator, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. That it's our mind that we're seeing. But once we accept that, the process is very easy because it's natural. Jung says that this process, this individuation process, this becoming ourselves, this opening up, this other stage of life really that is set to go, it's a natural part of our human nature. All we have to do is be aware of it. We become like gardeners. We cultivate and create the right conditions for it to grow. And when we do that, it transforms our life, and then we're able to create the kind of love and relationships that we want to see in our lives.
Yeah, and I think these patterns that we have been speaking of, that both of you have spoken about, are also opportunities for us to get some insight, right? If we are attracting that same man, same kind of man, and thinking all of the men out there are like this without recognizing we're the common denominator, or we find that we're in certain types of relationships where maybe we aren't treated as well, these patterns can be a real clue to help begin to get these unconscious things up to the conscious, right?
Mm-hmm. A big opportunity I hear a lot, too, from women is, well, I see my pattern. I see that I attract someone who won't commit, but then they commit to the next woman after me. So what does that mean? Why does that happen? And people, just because someone commits doesn't mean it's true love. That might be a more comfortable dynamic with his inner Adam and the inner Eve, to be with someone who's maybe not as pressing for that connection. And you just don't know what that dynamic is. So it's not that he chose you over her or was non-committal with you but not for her. He could still be non-committal and be in a relationship. Non-committal means that you're not willing to open your heart, or willing to go deep with someone. And I think a lot of the women, especially women that are drawn to personal development, like all of you listening, you're deeper people. You are not the average woman out there in the field of all the 96 million people in the U.S. that are single. You are like the cream of the crop. You're the top, with the creme de la creme. And you are rich and powerful, and so not an average being. He's a mortal. Will be, it takes someone really just as extraordinary as you are. And some people aren't up to the task to hold all that amazingness that you have. So don't think of it as that you got rejected. Think of it as, their match would be resonated better with that. And it doesn't mean better. It just means different.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because I do believe that those who are on the summit and who are taking the time to invest their time and energy in learning and understanding and growing are much more likely to meet and attract the right person. I know had it not been for all of the personal work that I did, I would have never arrived at my I say destination. It's really a beginning, right? When you
the next journey.
Yeah, the next journey. The beginning of the next journey when you partner with someone. And so I appreciate that you've complimented our listeners in that way, because it's true. Not that many people ever really take the time to figure out what's going on in their lives, and so many people live their entire lives coming from that unconscious state and not even understanding at all what's happening, and are calling it fate, right?
That's right.
So here's a question that I know a lot of women would be interested to hear your point of view on, and that is, so how does a woman recognize when they have met the right person?
Oh, that is the magic question, right?
Yeah, it is.
Well, what is quite often happens is that, when we get infatuated with someone, like when we're unconscious, the unconscious chemistry, it feels like, ooh, we're on top of the world and we're floating and we're imagining getting married to them after the first date, and that is probably not love. What's normally love is it's a combination of excitement and fear. It's this, you're really feeling a connection with someone, but there's this, I wouldn't say fear, but this hesitation of questioning what it is. And we see this a lot with people. Like, you hear the stories of, I met him and everything was perfect, and we just, we knew we were meant to be the first 5 minutes we were together. That's very rare. What I really tell my clients, especially when they meet their guy, is that they're always like, they want to run the other way more than, they're excited, but they also want to run the other way, because it's like, this is really it. And there's a different feeling. It's not, I don't know if I would call it fear, but it's like this, it's like an excitement, but also a hesitation, like that is this too good to be true? Or there's that kind of, I don't know, there's just a lot of energy going around. So, and the only way you really know is if you go through the relationship and see. But I just to kind of distinguish, I know it's hard to tell.
Well, that's why the poets have it over us.
Over Debbie.
Scientists, yes.
But I always say it's not this, like, if you feel doubt or concern, or you feel like you want to run away, but you really feel connected, that sometimes it's not because the doubts are real. It's because the ego's going, okay, she's really going to go for it this time. Everything we've guarded her against her whole life is here right now, and so you'll feel that last push from your ego to run away or find something wrong, or try to fight it, and it's a different kind of feeling. And I always say it feels just so different. Mm-hmm. And I know for me, when I met Rob, there was something about it. I just felt like he wasn't going anywhere. Like, maybe I was wrong, but I guess I was right. He's been here for 9 years. But I felt like there was this kind of a connection that was more solid and grounded. Yeah. And even though in my mind I was still fearful a little bit of, like, I hope I, don't get hurt again, and all those, is the other shoe gonna drop type of chatter that goes on in my mind. But there was something deeper, like, that was like holding it there, and it's just hard to describe, but it felt like home. I felt like I found my other home, my second home.
I can give you the psychological version of that.
Okay, after my crazy explanation.
There's really 4 levels to the experience of love. One of them is the kind of the raw attraction, right? That animal instinct that we have for each other, which is really initially what we feel when we see somebody and we don't know them yet, but we know there's that pull there, that attraction. The second one is that romantic piece. We connect with somebody at a romantic level where the mind brings in all the mythology, right, of Helen, of sacrificing ourselves for that person, and really loving them to I'll do anything for this person. I'll swim the ocean to be with them, and the flowers, of course, and the poetry, the romance. It's a beautiful piece, of course, of our experience in love. Then the third.
Sorry to interrupt. That's the piece that Hollywood and everything can't.
Exactly. Yes. The third piece then is the conjugal love, where we really honor each other as human beings and respect each other, and we really listen to each other as not just in a romantic sense, but this person has something important to say, and I love the way they think and the way they see the world, and it enriches my life, and I feel validated by them and accepted. And at that level, right, people start thinking, well, this person is somebody I could live with and marry and create a family with. It's beyond just the romantic piece. And then the fourth level, if we're lucky enough, and I should say each level incorporates the previous ones as well. In other words, it doesn't exclude them, right? It incorporates them as well. Then the fourth level is a spiritual level, where the relationship takes you to heights in your being that otherwise you could not reach. That ability to love, to open up to another person, and to experience love at that level is very akin to God, right? To experiencing yourself as oneness and losing the ego self. You know, it's a transcendent experience.
So his answer sounds better.
But we experience them both, right? Yeah. That questioning, like you were saying, of the excitement is there, but you also have a push and pull kind of situation. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the beginning of right, the seeds of that love.
Yeah, and I think that I could really relate to what Debbie was saying, that it just felt different, and it can be a little bit difficult to describe. And people, of course, would tell me, you'll just know. Mm-hmm. And I would think, oh, who are we kidding here? You know, I got a little cynical along the way at times, and yet it did feel different. And while there was, because I was 43, very independent, had been single all my life, there certainly were some things to work through in terms of, you know, how I was going to merge my life with the life of another human being, even though I loved him. So there were some, you know, anxieties around that perhaps. But underneath it all, for me, there was also this peace and this calm, and I could really relate when you said I just had this sense that he wasn't going anywhere. I had the sense that he was going to be there for me in the ways that mattered. And my husband and I now have been married for a little over 8 years. He's seen me through a breast cancer journey. It's been an amazing gift and blessing in my life, which is why I think so many of us find our way to this work that we're doing in helping other people through our own personal journey, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yes.
So before we wrap up today, I want to give you both an opportunity to just share a parting thought or piece of wisdom, and I want to thank you both for your contribution and generous sharing of your wisdom.
Well, thank you, Michelle.
Well, I'd like to start by just saying that just notice where you're running from with your feelings. Notice what the triggers you have around love and what you're trying to avoid. And try to be more conscious with them and be more present with them instead of pushing them away, to examine them. Because they're really showing you where you stop and where the walls go up. And what we tend to do, and what's very popular for people in this industry, is to clear it or heal it. And it has a message, and it's like showing you. It's like showing you something that you need to pay attention to. It's like your body is your psyche is at a homeostasis, and it's going, okay, especially when we have an upset feeling, I see it as us edging on the edge of our comfort zone. And what we wanted, and what we tend to do, is want to run away, go back to our comfort zone. But your comfort zone is creating your current reality. So parting words is to just notice the feelings that come up and how you want to run away from them. And how running away from them is making you run away from love and having that opening your heart. And so see if you can stay present with them a little more and just examine them without judgment, just to see what's there. And it'll give you more power, and it'll open your heart.
Beautiful. And I would just like to end with this idea. It's from the Upanishads, actually, a very ancient scripture. It says that basically our essence as human beings is love. there's nothing really to create or to acquire from the outside world. We are made out of love. Our consciousness, our awareness, our presence, our life force, if you will, that we feel as ourselves, it is love. It's simply that we've forgotten that truth, and the process is really getting back to that full awareness. And when we do that, then we radiate and generate love from inside out.
Beautiful.
Yeah, beautifully said, both of you. So I again want to thank you once again for being here with us today, and thank you so much for being here with us today. Debbie, Rob, and I are all sending you lots of love, many blessings, and wishing you happiness as you get ready for your right guy. Bye-bye for now.